Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Chancellor, which is the Magicka Templar DPS build. It is a build to help you get to in-game and can be adjusted for in-game with some simple changes, and we'll get to that at the end of the video. But before that, I need to go over a few things so people understand. The build itself, though, is more of like a cross between group support and group damage. Like damage and group support, and it works out really good in dungeons, and then when you move into trials, you have to make some changes to it to give it a little bit more distance on the boss. So let's go ahead and take a look at the stats, shall we? So it is a Breton Templar. You can use a High Elf. In fact, I would probably suggest a High Elf, but a Breton works out really well, especially with the Templar class itself, because they already get a reduced Magicka from being Templar and reduced stamina cost, but being a Breton gives you extra reduced cost to your abilities, which saves you Magicka in the long run. And honestly, you don't need as much in recovery. That's why you see this one has a little bit lower recovery rate. We do have a 38k Magicka, 17k health, and an 11k stamina with a 27-37 spell damage, 49% spell critical, and an 18k physical or spell resistance with a 10k physical resistance. The reason we have 18k spell resistance is because we are a Breton. They get a lot of starting resistances, or a lot of extra resistances for the class. We do have the Apprentice Mundus Stone to increase our spell damage. We are running Major Prophecy from Inner Light on both bars. And then on top of that, we have Witch Mother's Brew to increase our max Magicka, max health, and stamina recovery. Again, the food will change when you move into trials, into vet trials, not normal trials. You want to keep this the same on normal trials, but when you move into vet trials, definitely switch it. Alright, so let's take a look at the gear. And on the gear, we're running a very different set than some of the other stuff. We are running a two-piece Illumbras. And the reason we're running two-piece Illumbras is it just does really good range damage. So this build is made to be at ranged, so that's why we're using Illumbras. It gives us extra Magicka, and then on top of that, it does flame and shock damage at range. So it's just really good to have, and it does a lot of damage. So we are running a 5 light, 1 heavy, 1 medium setup. So this right here can be these tri-stats are this here. You want both light. Sorry. The tri-stats on the big pieces is important, especially for starting out. It's going to give you the best like overall survivability kind of thing, and then you can change it later on. On the chest and the belt, or the chest and legs, we are running heavy and medium. So we are running a heavy chest with medium legs. With the new appearance system, you can actually get away with this and still look kind of magic based. If you don't want to run this, you can run this heavy and medium if you want, but you're not going to have the same resistances. With the chest and legs being like this, though, you get extra... you also get a little bit extra health and some stamina stuff. So we'll get to that when we do the passives. The smaller pieces, you want to run Divines, Magic, and then the big pieces the whole set you want to run Divines, but the big pieces, Tri-Stats, and then the smaller pieces you want to run Magicka Glyphs. Down to the jewelry now. The jewelry is 3 pieces of willpower. This is going to give you increased max Magicka and extra spell damage. As you can see, that gives you 193 extra spell damage. If you're playing on live, it's going to be purple, and it's going to give you 180 something spell damage, along with this 299. That's going to give you the greatest amount of spell damage you can get in the game. Moving down to the weapons now. And on the jewelry, run 2 spell damage, 1 recovery, and I'll explain how you can get more out of it later. And then moving down to the weapons, we are using 2 crafted staffs, 1 fire staff, 1 lightning staff. The fire staff is Nirnhoned with a shock enchant, and then the lightning staff is infused with weapon damage. And I'll explain when we get to the rotation why we have this set up this way, because it does end up giving you better results. Alright, So that's it for the gear. Let's move on to the skills. Always make sure you get your class passives unlocked, because your class passives are going to give you greater benefit to your character overall. Even if you don't use skills, there's still a chance you might need some benefit from it later on down the road. So, Destruction Staff, make sure you fill in all the Destruction Staff passives. On armor, when it comes to being light armor wear, always max out your passives here. And the reason why you want to max out your passives in the armor type you wear is because of the 5-piece bonus that you can get from wearing it. Especially like the spell critical and the spell penetration. Moving on to the medium armor, you only need the top 2 and the bottom 1, but really you only need the bottom 1 because of the extra roll dodge. Reduced cost of dodge rolling is the only one you really need. You don't need stamina crit or the stamina recovery or that. The stamina recovery is nice, but you don't ever have enough anyways, so. Heavy armor, get the top 3 passives, and then in world skills, you can be a vampire with this. It does work out pretty good, or a werewolf. Werewolf's not so good. But it's preference of play, so you have your choice. But vampire does really work good with this. You can go with these two in the soul magic. These just help out with return of stuff. On the fighter's guild, I always go with intimidating presence and banish the wicked for ultimate gen. And on the mage's guild, I always get all of them. And the main reason why I get all of them is because sometimes I do use the ultimates from these. So, it's kind of nice to have. Moving on to Undaunted, always get the Undaunted passives, and you don't need any Alliance War. We can skip that. And in the Breton, make sure you get all the Breton passives. Alchemy, always get the medicinal use, and in Provisioning, get Gourmand and Connoisseur. The reason you're going for Gourmand and Connoisseur, though, is because you are going to be using a 1-hour food when you're in vet trials. So having this last longer is really good. Now, this build, the way it's set up now, will work in vet trials if your group allows it, so you can get comfortable with the vet difficulty. Alright, so now going down to the skills here, we are running a kind of a different setup than on our other builds, and that is because we are running Force Pulse. This is going to give us a good amount of damage to our abilities, and it also has a chance of hitting nearby, or it has the ability to hit nearby enemies with extra damage. Next up is Puncturing Sweeps. Now you are mainly going to be using this only in dungeons. When you move into trials, you do not want to use this because you don't want to get that close. Because the enemies can hit you super hard. But if you can get away with it, then you can stick with using it, but you don't really need it in trials. We'll show you the ability you can swap this out with. In fact, we can go ahead and do that right now. If you're in a trial, I would suggest swapping it out for Purifying Light. And the reason I say Purifying Light is this is going to allow you to stack extra damage on the enemies, and on top of that, it'll do damage, and then for 6 seconds it'll like absorb extra damage, and then it can help do a bigger chunk of damage in the end. So this is a good one to have in place of this. Alright, next up, and it does a nice heal. But this one, the main reason why we have it there is for this right here, Piercing Spears ability, to give us extra critical damage for having this slotted. That's the main reason why we use the spears. And also we get Burning Light from it. Next up we have Vampire's Bane. Now this blasts the enemy with a Radiant Heat, doing fire damage and extra fire damage over 11 seconds. So this is a dot, and you really need this dot there. It also does reduce movement speed, and it also gives you Major Prophecy, even though you already have it, but don't worry about that. It's mainly for the damage it does. The next ability we have is an Execute. It's called Radiant Oppression. It does fire damage. You are not going to be firing this off during your rotation until you get the enemy below 50% health. Then you will fire it off. But you want to make sure that you have all your dots applied first before you do this. Next ability you have on your bar is Inner Light. This gives you Max Magicka by 5%, and then also gives you Major Prophecy all the time for having it slotted. So this is why we don't need to worry about this Major Prophecy. You can change this out if you want for something else, but you're going to lose that Max Magic, and you don't really want to do that. The next ability we have is Elemental Rage, or Fiery Rage. This is the Destruction Staff's ultimate, And actually, it's not quite as good as the Mage Guild Ultimate, but it's still really good because it does do a lot of damage. On to the back bar. On the back bar, we have Blockade of Storms. This is going to be up all... You're going to want this up as much as you can, because even though off balance isn't needed as much, it is still good to apply that off balance for the purpose of heavy attacks, and also your stamina DPS will gain greater benefits from it. So that's why we are using this. The next one we have is Blazing Spear. This does really good damage, and people can also synergize off of it for stamina or magic or whatever one they have higher. So it's just a little bit of group support with damage on top of it, and it does do a lot of damage. So the next ability we have is Harness Magicka. This gives us a really good damage shield, but on top of that, it also gives us a way of getting Magicka back for when we're in trials, because we're not going to have really good resource management in trials. We're just not. But it does give Magicka back, which is really good. And then next but not least is Ritual of Retribution. This is a good AoE heal and a good AoE damage dealing ability. It's also a good synergy. So this gives you 2 synergies for your group on the back bar, which is really nice. So that's why I said it's kind of supportish and damage dealing at the same time. And then next up we have Inner Light. This does major or increase max magic and major prophecy again. And then finally, the final ability we have, which is the ultimate, you will probably use more than you will the other one, and that is Solar Prison. The reason why I say Solar Prison, you're going to use this one over the other one, is this one actually does some really cool stuff. First off, it does really good damage every 1 second for 10 seconds, and then also applies Major Maim, reducing the damage done by 30%. This has a 10-second duration, and is also a synergy. So you have 3 synergies that your people can synergize off of, which is really good. And this does a little bit more group support than the other ability. So this is one you're going to want to use more often, even though it doesn't do quite as much damage as this. So that's the skills. Now let's move on to the champion points. And just like with all my Magicka builds so far, they're very similar. We do have 56 in the Ironclad, reducing damage taken from direct damage by 20%. Moving over here, we have 3 into Light Armor Focus, increasing our physical resistance by 312. We have 56 into Thick Skin, reducing the damage taken from damage over time effects by 20%. And then 43 into Hardy, reducing physical poison disease damage by 10%. And 43 into Elemental Defender, reducing Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. These do stack with Thick Skin and Ironclad, just so you guys know. So really good to have a good amount of mitigation on DPS. Moving over here, we have 16 into Expert Defender. This reduces your damage taken from light and heavy attacks by 10%. And 60% roughly of most enemy attacks or mobs attacks, including bosses, is light and heavy attacks. So this stacks with that Ironclad and then the Hardy and Elemental Defender. And then the last one here is Quick Recovery. And we have 23 in here to give us 6% healing received. We already have a lot of healing abilities, but having a little bit of healing received really helps us with our survivability, even from other healers. So it just gives us greater heals received, which is always going to be beneficial to us. Moving on to the green tree, we have 23 into Warlord, reducing break free cost by 10%. We also have 20 into Sprinter, reducing our sprint cost by 10% or 12%. Now I've been asked why I put into these and why I put the tri-stats on the build. The tri-stats are there to give you extra resources, because trying to become comfortable with a build can be a problem if you don't have enough resources. This allows you to become comfortable with the build, and having the higher resources also gives you better results from things like this, because it reduces the cost. So if you reduce the cost of sprint by 12%, that's 12% off the stamina cost. So it saves you resources in the long run. Plus, it gives you better control of those resources because you have a bigger pool. And it's not a massive pool, it's just a little bit bigger than what you normally have. Moving on, we have 75 into Arcanus, increasing your magic recovery by 14%. 43 into Tenacity, increasing your magicka return of fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. We are using a fire and lightning staff, so we only get 30% base return. If we are using a resto staff, we get another 30% on top of that, but we're not. So with this setup, you actually get a 20% or a 40% return from your heavy attacks, and with having that high magic recovery, we get more resources back. Moving on to the final one here, we have 56 in the tumbling, reducing the dodge roll cost by 20%. Now remember when I told you want that one medium piece, one medium thing filled in on the bottom in medium armor? That's for the 4% extra reduced cost in dodge rolling. So it's going to cost you 24% less in dodge rolling. That's why you kind of want that there. And then 23 in the Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 10%. They did just recently reduce the block cost with Dragon Bones, so it's now 1730 to block in stamina. So having 173 removed saves you a little bit more resources, so you can block a few more attacks. Moving on to the final tree, the blue tree, we have 56 in the Elfborn. This increases the damage and healing of critical strikes with magic abilities by 20%. Remember, we are using some heals and critical damage. Plus, we get that passive bonus that gives us 10% extra critical damage from the Aedric Spear line. And we have Aedric Spear on both bars. So this will give us 20% plus that 10%. That's 30% more damage every attack. So it's kind of really beneficial we have that at 20%. Next, we have 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage. We are using a Flame and a Shock staff, so we do get greater damage from it. We're also using some of the abilities from the Dawn's Wraith. Whenever we activate one of those, we also get 5% major or minor sorcery. So we get a 25% magic damage increase, and that applies to Flame, Frost, and Shock and magic damage. So a lot of our abilities do flame and magic damage. This just helps it out. We have 4 into Spell Erosion, increasing our spell penetration by 413. And then moving over here, we have 35 in the Stack Expert, increasing our light and heavy attack damage by 20%. We also have 51 in a Master at Arms, increasing our direct damage by 19%. And if you guys didn't know, heavy attacks from fire staffs do gain a benefit from Master at Arms. And the rest of staff and the lightning staff, so fire and frost gain a bonus from this in heavy attacks. Flame and frost, or lightning and resto gain a bonus from here from their light and heavy, from their heavy attacks. Their light attacks are still going to be based off of these two, but their heavy attacks are based off of this. So this is kind of why we have this built out this way, is to give the greater benefit. So our heavy attacks are going to do more. No matter what, they're going to do the same amount when it gets all added together from all these bonuses. The other nice thing about this is any direct damage abilities you do are boosted by 19%, and any of the damage over time you do is boosted by 19%. But it's not just boosted by 19%, because it's also boosted by 10%, so it's 29%, almost 30% more damage. So it's really nice. So that's the champion points. And let's go ahead and take a look at the build in action. So I'm going to do a kind of like a cheese parse where I show you guys the rotation, and then I'm going to do a full parse where I just kill the skeleton and show you guys the DPS per second kind of thing on a skeleton. Now remember, in a trial or in a dungeon, because of all the other benefits you get from your group, the damage will change. So I got to make sure I'm on the right bar here. And I want to make sure I have my Witch Mother's Brew going. Good amount of time. We're going to go ahead and do this. And we're going to go ahead and get the potion going. And then just automatically start with Wall of Lightning. Light attack, spear, light attack, and then drop this, and then light attack again, and then swap bars. And light attack in between all of these. Now, you don't have to do Radiant. That's just a habit of mine. And then when you come back to the back bar, you want to heavy attack. Whenever you do this stuff, after you do each of these, you want to heavy attack, except for when you do this ability. Then you want to light attack, swap bars, light attack, do that, light attack, do this, and then light attack, and then swap bars. Do not use the ultimate until you need to. kind of thing, and then just keep this up as much as you can. So I'm going to let this wear off, and then what we're going to do is a full rotation, or the rotation, just so you guys can see its DPS per second. It's not going to be that high. It's going to be between 14 and 18k, depending on how well I can keep the rotation, and if I can get higher, I will. But I will also show you how to set it up for trials and what you need to do to adjust it for trials. It's not hard. So let's go ahead and do this again. We're going to start with the potion, Wall of Lightning, light attack. And there is an issue with the game right now when doing light attacks for some reason, or heavy attacks afterwards. As soon as we get it down to 50%, we're gonna do the other thing. We're almost there. Oh my gosh, I did that wrong. I did that wrong. Oh my gosh, I'm doing this like crazy, like. And there we go. So as you guys can see, we did 15,329. I could have gotten up to 16, but to get it up to 18, it takes a lot of practice, and I'm not going to sit here and practice for 20 minutes to show you guys that. Now, if you guys are wondering how to set this up for trials, that's a little bit easier. So the first thing you want to do to set this up for trials is you want to get a master staff for the front bar, maelstrom for the back bar, or run an asylum. Which, because you are running the force pulse, running an asylum staff would be a lot better, and then running a maelstrom staff on the back bar. Now, when you're running asylum, you have to activate so many times to get the force pulse thing to go off. Just remember, you have 10 seconds in between each one, so as long as you keep your rotation going, every 3 rotations you will apply the chilled, burning, and concussed all at once. So it kind of works out. And then on the back bar, the maelstrom's there, so your light and heavy attacks do more damage. So that's why we run the Nernhold on the front bar, is because now our light attacks are getting increased by an extra damage amount. That's why we want that setup. Now, the other thing that you can do to get greater DPS is change this one out to a Magicka damage glyph. And then that way you're running 3 Magicka damage on here. And then last but not least, change out the tri-stats to Magicka, and then switch to dual stat food. This will give you greater Magicka, roughly about 44 or 45k Magicka, with a 17k health. You will have a lot lower stamina pool, but your spell damage will go up a little bit, and your crit's going to stay the same. Everything is pretty much going to stay the same, but your recovery is going to drop. And this is what your recovery, if we're going to look, your recovery is actually going to be lower than this. It's going to be about 700 and something, unless you're a high elf. So this right here, you can change it out. And the races that are best for this, to be honest, are Breton, Argonian, for that, and my choice for the main races to choose from. High elf is better for DPS, and then like support wise, Argonian and Breton, and then dark elf and high elf for the DPS side. But any race can do this build. It's just up to the player to decide in the group to allow it. So, but that's pretty much the build. And that's the Chancellor, guys. I hope you guys like this build. I have had a lot of fun making these builds, working on them, playing them, and that kind of things. There is some of these builds I would play personally, but I don't play a lot of these builds because I only have 10 characters on live. So, but if you guys like this build, you guys can hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me or more videos by me, you can always hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.